Hello and welcome to a Technology Tuesday for November 2008. Today I'll be talking about the Sansa Clip and NetBooks. The Sansa Clip is a relatively cheap MP3 player and audio recorder. Two notable features. The first one is the small little device has a microphone directly at the top, and you can see that indicated here by the icon. It also has a USB port on the side which allows you to recharge the internal batteries and transfer files over onto your computer. One of the reasons I particularly like the Sansa Clip is it is incredibly cheap. Starts off at about $30 for a 1 gig version, and this allows you to record between 5 to 6 hours of content. The device goes up to about 8 gig in size, and here we're spending a little bit more, about $100. But that would allow you to record somewhat between 40 to 48 hours of content. I don't think you probably need that. I think the sweet spot is either the 1 gig or the 2 gig. The reason I like this device is in the past we've tried to equip classrooms with microphones to record presenters as they teach. The issue with this is the presenter moves around the room and they move in and out of the coverage provided by the microphones within the room. So this has a tendency to make somebody sound very loud and very quiet. Doesn't really create a particularly engaging experience. If you're able to get the microphone on the presenter can move around the room and the audio quality is consistent. Now, in the past, this might have taken place by using a wireless mic. These have a tendency to pick up sounds. If we have students using Blackberries or other sort of wireless devices, this can create interference on the recording. So the safest way to record is to give somebody a device that doesn't use wireless capabilities. And again, another reason why I really like the Sansa Clip is they're cheap. $35 for a recording device versus hundreds of dollars for a wireless mic, or perhaps approaching $1,000 to properly equip a room for audio. So this is sort of guerrilla podcasting, incredibly cheap, using off-the-shelf digital devices. This does present a change in behavior. If you are recording yourself in the classroom, there are a couple of things that you need to be aware of. The first thing is the microphone that you're using does pick up your voice, but it doesn't necessarily pick up voices of people at the back of the room. So good practice is to repeat or rephrase the question. For example, you might say something like, "Let me repeat that. Your observation or your question was," and this ensures that the question is recorded on the device. It also provides you with an opportunity to think for a couple of seconds about how to properly answer that question. You should also consider telling students that you will be recording classes. I suggest you do this in the syllabus so they're aware of this before they sign up for a class. Using a recording device may cause some students to be less free in the way they talk. Some students might want to take your class because they know that you're recording things. So it affects student behavior. It's good practice to tell them before they sign up for a class. And then lastly, you're using technology. Technology does not always work as intended, so your students should understand that things may go wrong. Just because you're recording a particular class doesn't guarantee that everything will work, and it definitely isn't a reason for them to stay home if they have the opportunity to come to your class. In terms of recording, what I think is the best practice is to look at your class and see if you can break things up. I don't think it's the best idea to press start at the start of the 3-hour class and then click end 3 hours later, because you'll have to go through your audio recording looking for gaps, looking for those areas where you had breaks and splitting this recording up or deleting those areas of dead air. A better practice is to start recording and then stop recording as there is a natural break in your class. You then pick up with the second part of your class and start recording. There is a risk that you might forget to start recording, but I think this is a better practice. It makes editing a lot easier, and it also ensures that you're less likely to record something that you don't particularly want to record. For example, you don't really want to be wearing this device and then walking to the restrooms or having a personal chat with one of your students and then broadcasting that to the rest of the class after the event. Anyway, so let's imagine you have recorded some segments on your Sansa Clip. The process of editing is fairly straightforward. You plug it into your computer and then you import a WAV file into Audacity. You're going to want to trim that recording. What I suggest is just excising the start and the end of the recording, the dead air or static as you switch on the device and clip it to your shirt. You then export this as an MP3 file and you add some metadata, essentially the name of the recording, when this took place, and my suggestion is to use a template for this to ensure that there is consistency in how you name your recordings. As part of this process, you're going to want to give a name to your file. My suggestion, again, is to follow a template here, to follow a convention, and to ensure that there are no spaces between words in the name of your recording. I'm using a hyphen here to break things up. In terms of the metadata, there are 3 areas that Audacity allows you to fill when you export as an MP3. The first area is the title, and here my example is MKT 595 Week 1 Part 1. Then the artist, this will be your name. The third area is the album. Think of this as being the weeks for your class. So the first week will be Marketing 595 Week 1. There may be 3 or 4 separate recordings for that album, and those would be Week 1 Part 1, Week 1 Part 2, and Week 1 Part 3. In terms of track numbers, these will represent the parts for that particular album. So Part 1 is Track 1, Part 2 is Track 2. For genre, I'd suggest putting education, but that is an option that you may choose to use differently. And then comments is a field that you can add some sort of miscellaneous data. So perhaps you want to give a link to your website or a little bit more information about the recording. In terms of capacity, you'll generally see that each hour of recording on the Sansa Clip uses about 175 megabytes of storage space. When you take those files and process them in Audacity and export as an MP3, that compresses the file. So the file size there should be about 50 megabytes for a 1 hour recording. Once you have that MP3, the process of distributing this with your students is to upload this to iTunes U. The demo later and the handout I provided explain how this process works. It's not the only option, but it's free and it's easy to use. You could use S-Media as a distribution medium, or you could upload this to external websites and link to that from your Blackboard site. But I think iTunes U is very easy to use. The process of sending your files to iTunes U is creating a podcast. What we're doing here is we're taking your audio file, or it could be a video file, we're adding some RSS to that, and this allows your students to subscribe to your recordings. The nice thing here is if you think about your courses, they're a collection of weekly classes, and your students can start to subscribe in week 1. And if they're using iTunes U as the distribution medium, they only have to think about this process once, and from that point on, they'll automatically receive the recordings that you create. To set up a site on iTunes U, you'll need to get in contact with Diane Tarkowski of ITD. Her email address is on the page here, dtarkals@depaul.edu. You'll need to provide her with some information. She'll need to know the name of the course that you're teaching and the section number. With this information, she can create a password-protected site so only your students access your material on iTunes U. If you wish, you can also upload things to a public area, and this is open for anyone in the world to see. So let's show you how you can go about this process. And again, there are instructions that I've provided in an associated PDF with this demonstration, so you can use that to guide the process. So what you'll need to do initially is switch on your Sansa Clip. There's a switch at the side of the device to switch this on. And when you switch it on for the first time, it won't be in a ready state for recordings necessarily. You may see it on a different setting, such as music. All you need to do is click on the rocker switches here and move down to voice, click on the central button, and this puts you in a situation where you can record. You then highlight the record now option, which is the default at the top of the list, and press the central button, which starts your recording. You can see here that it's creating a WAV file, and there's a little timer there to show you how long the recording is. You'll then clip this to your shirt. What I suggest you do is lock the device. If you move the setting here to hold, this prevents you from inadvertently pressing a button and stopping your recording. So you'll teach your class as normal, and then at one of the breaks you'll take off your device, you'll move the hold switch back to the central position, and then if you press the central button you can stop your recording, and you'll want to say yes to save this. This recording is now saved on your device, and later on that evening or that day you can again press record now to record the subsequent parts of your lecture. So let's imagine you're finished for the lecture. You'll then want to grab those recordings and edit them on your computer. All you need to do is to take that back to your computer and plug that in via a USB connection. As you plug in your device, you'll see this appear on your desktop. I'm using a Mac here, but this situation should be fairly similar on a PC. So your device is connected, and if you navigate to the record folder on the device, you'll see another subdirectory or subfolder by the name of voice, and within that you'll see your recordings. I've got several here. The last one was VORC 006. So we can drag that recording onto the desktop, and what you'd want to do is, once you'd processed those recordings, to delete them from your device, so that way you're freeing up space for subsequent classes. So here I'm dragging these and deleting them from the device. You'll then want to process these recordings, so I'm using Audacity to do this, and from Audacity you'll want to create a new project and then import your recording. So here I'm clicking on Open, I'm navigating to the desktop and grabbing the WAV file. And here we have this up on the screen here. Okay, my recording is not the best possible recording. Because the way I've created this recording here today, there's some electrical items that are creating interference on the recording. There's some additional noise that's taking place in the background. This wouldn't be the case in a situation where you'd clip to the shirt and you're walking around your classroom. But anyway, what you'll want to do is to get rid of the dead air or static at the start and the end of your recording. And to do this, you simply drag and drop over an area of the recording. You then click on Edit, Delete at the start and the end of your recording. So here we have the recording that we want to share with our students. There are some additional processing tools that you can use on Audacity. One of them is normalization. If you think your recording has you talking too loud and too quiet and you want to sort of create a just quite right recording, you can choose normalize, which will sort of put your recording sort of within the acceptable bounds of volume. Anyway, once you're happy with things, you want to click on File, Export as MP3, and this will then create a MP3 recording on your computer. You'll want to choose an appropriate name to save this as. For the purposes of this screencast, I'm just going to call this test.mp3, and I'm going to click on Save, and here is the area where you can put in metadata. So I'm naming this test, putting in my information as the artist name, and filling in some additional data. As I said earlier, you'd want to use your templates to determine what is most appropriate here. And then that file is exported as an MP3. I'm not going to save changes. Now we've got this file, and what we want to do next is to share this with our students to find a place to distribute this. We're going to be using iTunes U, and the process for sharing this file is fairly straightforward. We'll assume that you've contacted Diane Tarkowski of ITD and she's created an account for you on iTunes. You'll then want to open a browser and go to itunes.depaul.edu. And on this page you'll see a link that says Visit DePaul University on iTunes U now. If you click on that, it'll give you the opportunity to put in your campus connection username and password. So I'm doing that now. And once you're authenticated, this will start to open up iTunes on your machine, and we can see this down towards the bottom of the screen. So I'm here within DePaul's iTunes U store, and you'll see a link to the College of Commerce under Academics at the top of the page. If you click on that, you'll see courses that you are the instructor for. So here there are 2 instances of Marketing 595. If I click on the second one, this brings me to my class, and you'll see on the right hand side there are a couple of options. One of those is Upload and Manage Files. If I click on that, this opens up another window where I can browse and add the recordings that I've created. So I simply click on Add New File. I'll browse to the desktop. Here's the MP3 recording I've created, and then you'll see that this is now in the queue. We'll see in a second this being processed and uploaded to my account. And once your recording is finished, you can click on Done. And you'll see now that your recording is added to your course account area. You can see this is a pretty short recording. It's only about 20 seconds in length. But your students are now able to download this from iTunes U. Returning to the keynote presentation, I'm going to talk now for a couple of minutes about NetBooks. You might have heard about these in the press recently. A NetBook is essentially a laptop with certain features. It's a small device, it's lightweight, low cost, maybe just a couple of $100. It's energy efficient, and it's primarily focused on web browsing and email. Now, NetBooks are not a new concept. Back in the late 1990s, Psion, a British company, created a device called the Psion NetBook. This was a small little laptop device that you could switch on, and because it used flash memory, it was instantly on. You didn't have to wait for your operating system to load. it was on immediately, and when you'd finished working on a file, you could just quickly press the off button and everything was saved on the solid-state memory. The device was a little bit expensive and wasn't particularly popular here in the US. But now the NetBook concept seems to be very, very popular. There are many companies that have products that you can purchase at the moment. Those example companies are Acer with the Aspire 1, Asus with the E, Dell has the Inspiron Mini 9, HP has mini notebooks, and there's the MSI Wind. If you're considering purchasing these devices, or your students are considering purchasing these devices, there are a couple of choices available to you. Some of them will use solid state for memory, sort of flash for memory, whereas other devices will have hard drives. The advantage of flash is it's a stable storage mechanism. If you were to drop your device or something was to happen to it, typically your files would not be affected. With a hard drive, if you drop it or something nasty happens to it, catastrophic things can happen to the device. You can lose data. So for a mobile device, flash is good. The downside to flash is it is slower than a hard drive and it's a little bit more expensive. So solid state netbooks have a tendency to have a small amount of internal storage. The ones that use hard drives have a larger area. And then we have a choice of operating systems. You can choose Linux, which is an open source operating system, or you can choose Windows, which is a proprietary operating system. Now, some of these netbooks will come loaded with Vista. XP has a tendency to work a little bit better on these devices, so you'll sometimes see people reinstalling XP over Vista, or they'll consider reinstalling a different flavor of Linux. I've chosen here Ubuntu, which seems to be a relatively easy version of Linux to install. It's great for newbies. There isn't too much of a technical hurdle to overcome to install this on a netbook. So that's what I've chosen. Now there are a couple of instigators of change for netbooks. There are two companies that sort of created a sort of a philosophical change. The first one is the one laptop per child, OLPC. This was the brainchild of Nicholas Negroponte of MIT. He suggested that we should be able to build a laptop for $100 or less that would allow developing nations to distribute these to children, and these children then would have a better understanding of technology, and this would improve the economies of these nations. So that was the concept that he pushed. These devices are available for purchase, and what some altruistic folks are doing is they're purchasing a laptop for themselves and paying for a similar laptop to be distributed to a child in a developing nation. The other instigator of change is a company by the name of Asus that came up with the E laptop. They proposed that they would be able to create a laptop for $200. Sadly, this is not the case. The E's are a little bit more than that, between $300 and $600. But the concept took root. A lot of people were very excited by the fact that they could purchase low-cost PCs. Companies like Intel have noticed this development, and they're offering similar low-powered, low-cost devices. So you will see the Classmate PC perhaps in your classroom. Now, how is this going to affect you as an educator? There are three things I think you may notice. The first one is you may see more people sporting laptops in your classroom. These devices are cheaper, they're more affordable, so where people couldn't afford to bring these to the classroom, they may be able to now. The second area is file formats, particularly for those who are using the Linux operating system. Please note that if you're using the latest version of Office, the files that you distribute may not be files that your students can open. If you're sending out docx files, your students may not be able to read these, so please consider that. Save Word, Excel, PowerPoint files as earlier versions of Office so your students can open these readily. And then the third area is something we'll probably see next year. These devices, as I've said, are focused primarily on web browsing and email, and we may see a dumbing down of the operating systems. You may see your students using the ability to access the internet as a way to use cloud computing. Rather than having applications served from their computer, they'll access these through the internet. So they might be using Google Docs rather than a word processor on the computer. This could be an issue if we have classrooms that don't have Wi-Fi, if there are classrooms where these students cannot get onto the net. It may be an issue where we have too many devices in a classroom trying to access the web all at one time. But these are issues to think about for the future. Anyway, thank you for your time, and please listen in to next month's Technology Tuesday.